Hi everybody, this is Miss Liz from the Hightstown Library with a tween story and craft for you today, focusing on a Greek myth, the myth of Theseus, who was a mortal descendant of the god Zeus. So if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know that it's very dramatic. So in this myth, there's all kinds of drama, and there's the Minotaur, who is half bull, half man, and there's a princess, and there's a crazy inventor and his son, and all kinds of different things. So it's not your average story. If you're interested in Greek mythology, there's plenty of books at the library that you can put on hold and request and pick up. There's, of course, the whole fictional Percy Jackson series, and there are anthologies, collections of the actual Greek myths. There's some weird but true facts and other collections like that as well. Some graphic novel versions, like this one about Medusa. And then my personal favorite is the Dialoris Book of Greek Myths. This is where I took the myth of Theseus from for our story today. It also features the character of Icarus, who's the son of Daedalus, the inventor, who works to build the labyrinth for the Minotaur in this. And Icarus and his father at one point are trapped and need to escape, and they make wings and fly up to the sun. And of course, Icarus really likes flying high and gets really curious about flying up to the sun. So we decided to make a craft featuring the sun, a photo holder with clothespins and cardboard. So you can have notes, you can have photos, you can hang it in your room, and that's what we'll end up with today. So let's get started with our myth about Theseus. Theseus. The Muses sang of Heracles, which is the Roman version of Hercules, and his labors, and they also sang of the island of Crete, ruled by King Minos, the son of Zeus and Europa. His queen, Pasiphae, a daughter of the sun god Helios, had a golden glimmer in her eyes, like all the descendants of the sun, and was accustomed to great magnificence. King Minos wanted his queen to live in a palace as splendid as her father's, and he ordered Daedalus, an Athenian architect, an inventor of marvelous skill, to build the great palace of Knossos. The palace rose up story upon story over a forest of columns. Winding stairs and intricate passageways connected the many halls and courtyards. Pictures were painted on the walls of great halls, fountains splashed in the courtyards, and the bathrooms even had running water, which back then was a big deal. Bull's horns of the purest gold crowned the roofs, for the Cretans worshipped the bull, since Zeus, in the shape of a bull, had brought Europa to the island. Here the king and the queen and all their court lived in great splendor and happiness, until one day Poseidon sent a snow-white bull from the sea. Since the island of Crete was completely surrounded by his domain, the sea, he too wanted to be honored, and ordered King Minos to sacrifice the bull to him. But Queen Pasiphae was so taken by the beauty of the white bull that she persuaded the king to let it live. She admired the bull so much that she ordered Daedalus to construct a hollow wooden cow, so she could hide inside it and enjoy the beauty of the bull at close range. Poseidon was very angry, and for punishment he made the bull mad. It ravaged the whole island, and though the Cretans were great bullfighters, no one could subdue the beast until Heracles had come to capture it for one of his labors. To punish the king and queen, Poseidon caused Pasiphae to give birth to a monster, the Minotaur. He was half man, half bull, and ate nothing but human flesh. Such a fearful monster could not go free, and the clever Daedalus constructed for him a labyrinth under the palace. It was a maze of passageways and little rooms from which nobody could ever hope to find his way out. There the Minotaur was shut in, and as long as he was provided with victims to devour, he kept quiet. When he was hungry, he bellowed so loudly that the whole palace shook. King Minos had to wage war with the neighboring islands so he could supply the Minotaur with the prisoners of war for food. When a son of Minos visited Athens and was accidentally killed, King Minos used this as an excuse to threaten to sack the city unless 7 Athenian maidens and 7 Athenian youths were sent to Crete to be sacrificed to the Minotaur every 9 years. To save his city, Aegeus, the king of Athens, had to consent, for Minos was much stronger than he. The people of Athens grumbled, for while King Aegeus was childless and had nothing to lose, they had to see their sons and daughters sacrificed to the cruel Minotaur. 2 times 9 years had passed, and the king was growing old. For the 3rd time, a ship with black sails of mourning was due to depart, when word came to the king that a young hero, Theseus, from Troezen, was making his way to Athens, destroying all the monsters and highwaymen he met on the road. When King Aegeus heard that, his old heart beat faster. Once in his youth he had visited Troezen and had been secretly married to Princess Aerthra. He did not bring Aerthra back to Athens with him, but before he left he said to her, "Should you bear me a son, and should he grow up strong enough to lift this boulder under which I hide my sword and golden sandals, send him to me. For then he will be the worthy heir to the throne of Athens." King Aegeus in those days was known for his great strength. Theseus, the young hero, arrived in Athens and went straight to the king's palace. Tall and handsome, he stood before Aegeus with the sandals and the sword, and the king was overjoyed. At last he had a son who was a hero as well. The king happily proclaimed Theseus the rightful heir to the throne of Athens, and he became the hero of all Athens when he offered to take the place of one of the victims who were to be sent to Crete. Old King Aegeus begged his son not to go, but Theseus would not change his mind. "I shall make an end of the Minotaur, and we shall return safely," he said. "We sail with black sails, but we shall return with white sails as a signal of my success." The ship sailed to Crete, and the 14 young Athenians were locked in a dungeon to await their doom. But King Minos had a lovely daughter, Ariadne, as fair a maiden as eyes could see. She could not bear the thought of the handsome Theseus should be sacrificed to the ugly Minotaur. She went to Daedalus and begged for help to save him. He gave Ariadne a magic ball of thread, and told her that at midnight, when the Minotaur was fast asleep, she must take Theseus to the labyrinth. The magic ball of thread would roll ahead of him through the maze and lead him to the monster, and then it was up to Theseus to overpower the beast. In the dark of the night, Ariadne went to Theseus's prison and whispered that, if he would promise to marry her and carry her away with him, she would help him. Gladly Theseus gave his word, and Ariadne led him to the gate of the labyrinth, tied the end of the thread to the gate so he would find his way back, and gave him the ball. As soon as Theseus put the ball of thread on the ground, it rolled ahead of him through dark corridors, upstairs, downstairs, and around winding passageways. Holding on to the unwinding thread, Theseus followed it wherever it led him, and before long he heard the thunderous snoring of the Minotaur. And there, surrounded by skulls and bleached bones, lay the monster, fast asleep. Theseus sprang at the Minotaur. It roared so loudly that the whole palace of Knossos shook. But the monster was taken by surprise, and so strong was Theseus that, with his bare hands, he killed the cruel Minotaur. Theseus quickly followed the thread back to Ariadne, who stood watch at the gate. Together they freed the other Athenians and ran to their ship in the harbor. Before they sailed, they bored holes in all of King Minos' ships so he could not pursue them. Ariadne urged them to hurry, for even she could not save them from Talos, the bronze robot who guarded the island. If he should see their ship leaving, he would throw rocks at it and sink it. Should one of them manage to swim ashore, Talos would throw himself into a blazing bonfire until he was red hot. Then he would burn the survivor to ashes in a fiery embrace. They could already hear his clanking steps, when just in time they hoisted their sail and a brisk wind blew them out to sea. In their rush they forgot to hoist the white sail of victory instead of the black sail of mourning. Theseus's heart was filled with joy. Not only had he saved the Athenians from the Minotaur, he was also bringing a beautiful bride home to Athens. But in the middle of the night, the god Dionysus appeared to him and spoke. "I forbid you to marry Ariadne. I myself have chosen her for my bride. You must set her ashore on the island of Naxos." Theseus could not oppose an Olympian god. When they came to Naxos, he ordered everyone to go ashore and rest. There Ariadne fell into a heavy slumber, and while she slept, Theseus led the others back to the ship, and they sailed off without her. Poor Ariadne wept bitterly when she awoke and found herself deserted. Little did she suspect that the handsome stranger who came walking toward her was the god Dionysus, and that it was he who ordered Theseus to abandon her. The god gently dried her tears and gave her a drink from the cup in his hand, and right away the sadness left her. She smiled up at the god, and he put a crown of sparkling jewels on her head and made her his bride. They lived happily together for many years, and their sons became kings of the surrounding islands. Dionysus loved Ariadne greatly, and when she died, he put her jeweled crown into the sky as a constellation, so she would never be forgotten. Theseus, in his grief at having lost Ariadne, again forgot to hoist the white sail. When King Aegeus saw the black-sailed ship returning from Crete, he threw himself into the sea in despair. Theseus inherited his father's throne, and he and all of Athens mourned the loss of the old king, and in his honor named the sea in which he had drowned the Aegean. King Minos was beside himself with fury when he discovered that his daughter had fled with the Athenians. He knew that no one but the brilliant Daedalus could have helped Theseus unravel the mystery of the labyrinth, so Daedalus was kept a prisoner in the palace and treated very harshly. Daedalus could not bear to be locked up and let his talents go to waste. Secretly he made 2 sets of wings, 1 pair for himself and 1 pair for his son Icarus. They were cleverly fashioned of feathers set in beeswax. He showed his son how to use them and warned him not to fly too high, or the heat of the sun would melt the wax. Then he led him up to the highest tower, and flapping their wings, they flew off like 2 birds. Neither King Minos nor Talos the robot could stop their flight. Young and foolish, Icarus could not resist the temptation to rise ever higher into the sky. The whole world seemed at his feet. He flew too close to the sun, and the wax began to melt. The feathers came loose, the wings fell apart, and Icarus plunged into the sea and drowned. Sadly, Daedalus flew on alone and came to the island of Sicily. His fame had flown ahead of him, and the king of Sicily welcomed him warmly, for he too wanted a splendid palace and bathrooms with running water. As soon as King Minos' ships were mended, he set off in pursuit of Daedalus, the cunning craftsman. He sailed east and he sailed west, and when he came to the Sicilian shore and saw the wondrous palace going up, he had no doubts who was building it. But the king of Sicily hid Daedalus and denied that he had him in his service. Slyly, King Minos sent a conch shell up to the palace with a message that, if anyone could pull a thread through the windings of the conch, he would give him a sack of gold as a reward. The king of Sicily asked Daedalus to solve the problem. Daedalus thought for a while. Then he tied a silken thread to an ant, put the ant on one end of the conch shell, and a bit of honey at the other end. The ant smelled the honey and found his way through the conch, pulling the thread along with it. When King Minos saw this, he demanded the immediate surrender of Daedalus, for now he had proof that the king of Sicily was hiding him. Nobody but Daedalus could have threaded the conch. The king of Sicily had to give in. He invited Minos to a feast, promising to surrender Daedalus. As was the custom, King Minos took a bath before the feast. But when he stepped into the fabulous bath that Daedalus had built, boiling water rushed out of the tap and scalded him to death. And Daedalus remained for the rest of his life at the court of the king of Sicily. After the death of King Minos, there was peace between Crete and Athens, and Theseus married Phaedra, Ariadne's younger sister. He became the greatest king Athens ever had, and his fame as a hero spread all over Greece. Another great hero, Theseus, king of Lapith in northern Greece, was his inseparable friend. The first time the 2 heroes had met, they faced each other in combat. But each was so impressed by the other that instead of fighting, they dropped their weapons and swore eternal friendship. Together they performed many great deeds, and when Theseus married a Lapith princess, Theseus, of course, was invited to the wedding feast. The Centaurs were invited too, for though wild and lawless, they were nonetheless distant relatives. At first they behaved quite mannerly, but as the wine jugs were passed around, they became boisterous and rowdy. Suddenly a young centaur sprang up, grasped the bride by the hair, and galloped away with her. At that, the other centaurs each grasped a screaming girl and took to the hills. Theseus and Pirithous, with their men, set off in a swift pursuit and soon caught up with the centaurs. There was a brutal battle, for the wild centaurs tore up big trees and swung them as clubs. But in Theseus and Pirithous they had found their masters. They were chased out of Greece, and the victorious heroes, with the bride and the other Lapith girls, returned to the feast. Pirithous lived happily for a while. Then he became a widower and asked his friend Theseus to help him win a new bride. Theseus vowed to help him, but shuddered when he heard that Pirithous wanted no one less than Persephone, the queen of the dead. She was unhappy with Hades, the god of the underworld, he said. Since Theseus had promised to help his friend, and a promise could not be broken, he descended to the underworld with Pirithous. They forced their way past Cerberus, which is the three-headed dog in the underworld, and entered the gloomy realm. Hades glowered at the two heroes who had dared enter his palace, but he listened politely while they stated their errand. "Sit down on that bench," he said, "so we can discuss the matter." Grim Hades smiled as the two friends sat down, for it was a magic bench from which no one could ever rise. There they were to sit forever, with ghosts and bats flitting about their heads. A long time later, Heracles came to Hades on an errand, and pitied the two heroes trying vainly to get up from the bench. He took hold of Theseus and tore him loose with a mighty tug. But when he tried to free Pirithous, there came a loud earthquake. The gods did not allow Heracles to set him free, for when he had shown too great irreverence by daring to want a goddess for a wife. Theseus returned to Athens, wiser but thinner, for a part of him remained stuck to the bench. Ever since, the Athenians have had lean thighs. So to make your sun picture holder, you're going to need a couple different things. You can either make a small one with an old CD, or a larger one with cardboard of any size, and then you can make your circle any size. You're going to need clothespins. You're going to need yellow paint for the clothespins, or if you wanted to color them in a different way with markers or tissue paper. You're going to need some kind of glue, so either a hot glue gun, make sure your parents are okay with you using one, or tacky glue, craft glue. It's pretty good, it's pretty strong. And of course, you'll need scissors. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is make your circle. So you want to have an idea of where you're going to hang your picture holder, because that will give you an idea of how big you want to make your circle. If you're doing if you use small space, you might want a CD. And then you're going to want to use smaller pictures, of course, because bigger pictures will be too big for the CD. If you have a bigger space, you can use cardboard of any kind, or poster board, or cardstock or something. And then you're going to trace a circle and cut it out, and as big or small as you want, and that will be your base. So once you have your circle cut out, or if you're using the CD, then you can decide if you want to decorate it in any way. And if you're going to cover it with either scraps of construction paper, or tissue paper. If you're using a CD, you can definitely color that with like Sharpies, because that'll work out really well. The cardboard might be a little trickier if you're doing markers, just because that's not going to show up as well. So you want to do something that, or you could leave it plain, but if you want to decorate it, you don't want something that's too over the top, because then you want to make sure that the pictures that are going to be held by the clothespins are your main focus. So once you've got your sun decorated, you can start painting your clothespins. You can see, of course, I've got something to protect my workspace, so you want to make sure you've got that. And you want to plan out how many clothespins you want before you start painting, so you don't paint too many. And you can see for my son, I just did one coat. I think I might go back into a second, but I just did a coat of paint, nothing too crazy. And then once we're finished painting the clothespins, then we can go ahead and glue them on. But you've got to, of course, let everything dry first. Okay, and once it's dry, you can see it looks a lot brighter. And now we're going to glue our clothespins onto the sun base. So you're going to want to plan them out first, and you're going to want to use something strong like the tacky glue I mentioned earlier, or hot glue. So I'm doing about here where the clip, the spring meets in the middle of the clip, is where I'm going to set my clothespin. down on the base. And I'll glue that. And place that down and let that dry. And then the last thing left to do, once these are dry, is to find the pictures that you want. Okay. And of course, if you use hot glue, you're going to have all these little strings. I don't know if they're picking up on the camera, but all these little strings from the glue. So you're going to want to let it dry completely and then pull off the little strings. And then once everything's dry, you're ready to go. And you can put on pictures, you can put on little notes, and you can hang it anywhere you like. If you want to get some yarn or ribbon to glue on the back, maybe to hang it, make it easier to hang, that might not be a bad idea. But there is your sun with its rays picture holder, and it's just like the sun that Icarus flew too close to.